Chinese Counter-Strike in Global Offensive seems to very much be on the rise. As a region, they seem to be growing. It's not just TyLoo, but obviously TyLoo represent the absolute pinnacle of Chinese CSGO at the moment and have become a legitimately good team on an international level. So think about the expansion of CSGO as the game has gotten bigger and the scene has gotten bigger. It started out as a European game with North America, but they were lesser. And then they had a couple of teams that could compete, initially 1 and 2, depending on the tournaments and tournament settings. Then we got to a world where North America had some more teams overall. And at one point in time, had the Cloud9 team that went on a nice sick little run, as had Team Liquid recently. So we've got the two solid regions. Then along comes Brazil. And now Brazil, sure, through their pinnacle, has risen up to be pretty good, comparable with NA. And now their team obviously won the major, so they're very, very legitimate. And Tempo Storm's getting pretty good. Then you consider Australia, Oceania. It's kind of teased us with Vox Seminole having that great Gfinity Spring Masters 2, where they took all those maps off top teams, and we thought, wow, maybe they can develop into something. Never really got quite there, but they got to the level of a bunch of the top NA teams. So the best Australian team at least has been good. Immunity admittedly have had their problems in this tournament, the minor, and otherwise have had looked decent at times, but don't get to that many majors. Then Mongols also kind of teased us by winning the last minor and looking really strong in terms of fragging, but they didn't show up at Katowice, and admittedly those were really strong teams. That was a group of death, but that region didn't quite make it. Now, the key thing is, I think Chinese CSGO is actually going to make it more so than the Mongols. I mean, you can't really say Mongolian CS was getting beat, it's just the Mongols. They're going to make it more so than Mongols. They're much more legit, and they're going to make it more than Australia/Oceania, in my opinion. Now, obviously, to make it to the level of Brazil would be ridiculous to predict right now, because Brazil, the best team from there, just won a major. I mean, even their second best team won a tournament that had teams like Dignitas, Virtus Pro, and Tempo Storm. So I don't think it's that reasonable to say it'll be like Brazil, but I think someone like TyLoo can be at the level of a team like a Tempo Storm, and they can get to that kind of level where the regions could literally be Europe, and then it could be like China, depending on how North America does. Could be China or China and North America. Oh, well, I guess Brazil at the moment, it would be the second best region, right? So it'd go Europe, Brazil, China, North America, and then others, Oceania. So TyLoo qualified for the major qualifier already by coming top 2 at this minor. They look as though when they go to the major qualifier, they're going to have a pretty good chance of getting it into ESL 1 Cologne. I mean, depending on the group, obviously, I mean, there are going to be some strong teams out there, but I actually think, yeah, this is a team that should be able, when you consider who's going to be out there, there's many, many groups that they're going to be able to get out. So I think they're going to be at the next major. They look set to become and solidify themselves as a top 10 team. I mean, obviously they had this win where they were able to beat Luminosity Gaming in that best of 3, and they're the third team in all of 2016 to do that in an offline best of 3. And the other two teams who beat Luminosity, Na'Vi at full strength, making the finals of all those tournaments, Fnatic at full strength, the one that won 6 tournaments in a row, 3 last year, 3 at the beginning of this year. So they've got themselves in some fantastic company by doing that. And even though admittedly, yeah, LG was coming off the major and might not have been in top form and might have been a little bit overworked and burned out, still, it was still a legit win. You've also got to consider TyLoo's a team that has a pretty decent map pool. I mean, admittedly, they can't play Overpass and Train, but luckily there's only top European teams probably going to exploit that or be able to exploit that. And even then, when I say they can't play Overpass, they can still certainly play the CT side of that map and frag people. They've got good skill across the board, and they have a set style. And I think that's one of the things that's really promising about this team, that they have an identity and a coherent system to how they play the game. So that can be tweaked, that can be improved. They're not just a team that has good fraggers and are just winning if they win the aim duels. Speaking of which, the second best Chinese team, Vici, CyberZen, they are the team that I was describing there. That kind of stereotype. They have good skill. They have some good players. I think Savage is a good player. I think he can still improve a little bit, and even his level right now is pretty good. I think of the other players, Yuki had some pretty solid games at this tournament. I think he has some good fragging. Zoking can have times as an entry fragger, he can be pretty good. TB hasn't really lived up to his 1.6 legacy of being a decent player. He's just average. So they're a solid enough team. They've also got the veterans, obviously, because they've got Savage, they've got TB. I mean, over on TyLoo, the only real veteran you've got is Mo, and even then he only played like the end of 1.6, and he wasn't in any of the great teams, basically. So you've got Vici, and Vici, okay, don't have the system, don't have the style. Map pool isn't really as good, even as TyLoo's, but they've got some good fragging, and they try that default brute force style of play on T side. And so as a result, I do think that if they go in the future, if they can get to qualifiers or go to Western events, they can at least take the odd map from time to time. I think they can get to that level. And they can certainly give trouble to teams like NA teams or, like the 11th to 15th best European teams. These teams can certainly get upset by a team of the caliber of Vici. Not only have you got these two teams, but there are more teams on the way. First of all, there are two teams that are fairly new. So EDG, which is one of the biggest League of Legends organizations and has had one of the best teams in League of Legends for like the last 3 years. Let me think, would that be right? Yeah, last 2.5 years. They have got their own CSGO team that was announced a little bit ago. And then just recently, I think it was actually today or yesterday, eHome, who's a really big, well, not really big, but one of the big Dota 2 organizations, and a long time ago had a League of Legends team. They've also announced a brand new team to be made. Now, with all these teams coming in, presumably some of them have seen the success of TyLoo and thought, oh, there's more to this, and they've seen Vici pick up a team, so there's going to be a little bit of a gold rush to get these teams and be represented in CSGO, and they see that CSGO is growing in Asia in that respect in terms of the prominence. I think actually in this sense that this is a positive, because I can see a lot of other orgs getting involved, because what's funny is that TyLoo has the best CSGO team, because TyLoo is not some great League of Legends or Dota org. They're not some huge team like that, but they're a team that come from Counter-Strike. They're a team that were at the end of 1.6. I mean, the last 3 or 4 years, last 3 years, let's say, they had the best Chinese team, and they were a pretty good org, actually, in terms of just Counter-Strike. Now, going beyond that, when you consider the massive League of Legends and Dota 2 orgs, I mean, Vici's got involved. They're a big Dota 2 and League of Legends org, but the others haven't got involved now. So once those people get involved, there's going to be even more money coming, even more competition to get the teams, and then there's going to be more competition because there's going to be more support for all the teams and practice facilities and full-on training and ability and resources to attend Western events. Potentially China can get like 4 or 5 teams that are of a decent level, of the Vici type level, and maybe you can get another of the TyLoo level. Because outside of those teams I've named, so we've got TyLoo, Vici, EDG and eHome already have teams. Well, think about some of the other huge orgs. Vici Gaming, they're a massive org in Dota 2 and have a League of Legends team. LGD, big in both games, probably the biggest at the moment. I'd put my money as them as one of the biggest orgs with the most money. Newbie, Dota 2, they won the International. Supposedly they own Chao Gu now, who's one of the top League of Legends teams over in LPL in League of Legends. Now, for people who don't understand it, there is a lot of money in the Chinese esports economy. First and foremost, they have a huge streaming scene. So you see sites like Douyu.tv and all these other sites, they get massive millions of viewers on their service. Now, people can say, oh, it's view-botted, all the rest of it. It doesn't matter. There are so many people in China and so many people who play games and so many people who watch games that these viewers are worth something. Now, maybe the actual amount of money, disposable income that each viewer has isn't as much, so it might not be as worth as much overall, but with those sorts of massive numbers you can blow it up, and there's a lot of money in streaming. And so as a result, a lot of what allowed in games like League of Legends and Dota 2 players to be signed and have salaries that are like high 6-figure yearly salaries in US dollars is the fact that these massive streaming sites are involved and get these top players to stream as well and do deals with their teams. So you've got streaming as a massive way that money gets into the community. And then you've got all these rich owners. A number of these big teams have owners where their owner is like a millionaire or is the son of a billionaire or the son of some very rich man, and the org is his plaything to do what he wants with and to have fun, and I'm going to get this good player in because I want my org to beat this guy's. And it's become almost like the Premier League in that sense over in the Chinese esports scene, where people are going above and beyond the level of the money you can make from the actual orgs themselves. There's less a business and more the plaything of billionaires. It becomes just this cool thing to blow up the sport. So if that happens in CSGO, even to a small degree, we're seeing it's starting to vaguely happen, but if it happens any more and more of these teams get involved, then they're going to have all the pieces they need in terms of financial resources to get this even bigger in terms of Chinese CSGO rising and having better teams over there. Now, one of the really good things I think about the scene is obviously what we've seen from TyLoo, because they have this interesting style. And it's not quite the way the Europeans play, but it's also not the way the Brazilians play. It's also not the way North Americans play. So they've got their own style, and I'll probably do my own video on that in the future because it probably deserves its own, but I need to really break down more of the tendencies and be able to give you specific examples. Now, in terms of Vici, I think in their own way, they're promising in as much as that they play a very default style. They play almost like Envious last year, where they just have this default aim duel heavy style where you go in reasonably dry at times, and you just try and take the aim duels and win them. Now, they do have some interesting flashes. I mentioned on stream that the guys from G2, the team that's now FaZe, had said, and I think some other teams as well, that they had a lot of interesting pop flashes. So they have some tactical aspects, but it seems to be like specific individually to the player and what he wants to do. But their ability to get some success with this aim duel style works because they have some good skill, they have some good fraggers. So in a weird way, the fact that they're decent already, they're not good on an international scale, but they're decent. The fact that they're decent means there is room for growth because they've only gotten here through fragging and good players. When you add in either a style, not doesn't have to be TyLoo style, you'd fit it to this personnel, or you add in a more of an in-game leader mind and a more tactical prowess and adapting to the European meta and all the parts that make sense in your team, this team can be better immediately because they've already got the pieces in terms of fragging. Now, they do seem to need some sort of coach / in-game leader presence more so than they currently have. Like, that's where I feel like they're falling down at the moment. But who's out there in the Chinese scene? Well, we know Alex44. I know he came to StarLadder, I think, with CyberZen, now Vici Gaming. And he was a legendary 1.6 leader who took the lessons he'd learned from people like Khan and the European leaders and was able to make what was the original TyLoo squad, like, 2009 sort of era of 1.6, into like a top 10 team in the world. And they had a tactical style. And they weren't the best, but they were much more nuanced than the other Chinese teams, the ones that had like Savage in, for example, which were just like the CyberZen Vici Gaming team now, just trying to frag you and didn't have all the pieces and didn't know how to play the meta of certain sides of some of the maps, which is the problem you see from Vici at the moment. So in terms of the future, I think it's actually pretty likely that TyLoo's making it to the major. And so when they make it to the major, there's another spot where another Chinese team can come to the next minor and there can be competition for that spot. I actually think I have a theory that China should be good at every esports game it plays. Now, the key thing is, I've said in the past, I had a video about the topic, that I think Korea can be one of the best at any esports game that it gets really into. Now, that's the key point. I always say that last part, which is, because of the smaller population size contrasted with a massive country like China, Korea has to have it be like a social phenomenon. It has to be like League of Legends or StarCraft, something they get super into. Now, they can still have outliers, crazy examples like the CSGO team of We Made Fox and Lunatic High, CS 1.6 team rather, back in the day in the mid-2000s. But unless the whole country gets involved and it's like a social phenomenon, they're probably not going to be among the best. China, on the other hand, has so many people and so many gamers that what can be a very niche game like CSGO is in China still will have hundreds of thousands of people playing it, maybe even millions, and as a result can then actually contribute enough good players to make up teams, and then from them hopefully we get a couple of geniuses, well, a couple of fantastic players that can stand out and be the superstar players like we've had in the past from other regions. Kogu from Brazil, Solo from Korea, etc. We did originally have Jungle from China. So as a result, it makes sense to me. To me, it was almost inevitable if things continued long enough that China would at least get some decent players and maybe one team that was decent of the Vici level. I didn't know they'd have one as good as TyLoo and this soon, comparative to what's happened. Yeah, they've had teams in the past, KU or whatever that team was that beat LDLC White at ESWC. That was like three of the players. I think it was like two players that are now in Vici and just not Savage and TB. And then I think the one of them who's the coach of Vici now was a player in that team. And then going back, there were Chinese teams that just weren't relevant in any way. So I think that they should be good at CSGO. And like I said, in terms of TyLoo, certainly have a lot of potential of where they can go. You think of the past. So, okay, WNV Gaming, the lineup that was Jungle and Sakula and TK and Alex44, these guys, that team was able to be a team that won big events internationally. And admittedly, only in China and Korea was where they were winning the big ones, but they were able to beat some of the best teams in the world back then and become a top elite level team. Then you had TyLoo, like 2009 to 2010. They were a top 10 team in the world. They had upset potential. They could take top teams to like SK Gaming and others to 3 maps and make it really exciting. I mean, Savage's TyLoo, which was a different core lineup, which was in late, I think I was in like the end of 2011 to early 2012. Their team at the IEM 6 World Championship, which was in March of 2012, almost made it out to the playoffs, had gotten a bunch of upset wins. I think they beat Na'Vi, who was like one of the best teams of all time at 1.6. Back then that was Savage and Mo who were on that team. Mo is now on TyLoo, obviously. So I think the future is very bright for China, and I don't think it's not just a case anymore that we've seen TyLoo have that one upset over Luminosity, and we're all riding the hype train. I think the pieces are there where it makes sense that they're going to keep rising, and that the top team definitely can get quite good, and the others can get to a better level, and at least the level that Vici's at right now. So I think in the future, China is going to become quite relevant in CS:GO.